All right, for further analysis, let's bring in Andrey Kortunov, who is the Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council. He joins us now from Moscow. Andrey, good to have you on the show. Russia's Foreign Minister, Mr. Sergei Lavrov, said that Moscow would not wait indefinitely for a response, saying that we're running out of patience. Let me ask you this, sir. How realistic is it that the West, that NATO, give the written assurances, the written guarantees that Ukraine and Georgia will never join NATO?
Well, I don't think that the West is in a position to give Russia such guarantees. That would require very significant changes to the North Atlantic Treaty signed back in 1949. And I think that it is practically impossible to imagine that all the 13 members of the NATO alliance will be ready to go along with such a change. So I think that what the West can do, it can probably informally assure Moscow that there are no plans to get Ukraine into NATO anytime soon. It's not something that they're planning to do right away. But I don't think that such informal statement would make the Kremlin happy.
Okay, you talked about some of the informal steps. Let's talk about informal steps that Moscow could take. I understand Moscow's position, saying that it's nobody's business how we conduct our troops within our own territory. But if both sides are calling for a de-escalation to the situation, if both sides are calling for a diplomatic solution, I think you can understand that it's a very provocative move to continue with this military buildup in the region.
I would agree with that, but I think that the goal of the Kremlin is not a preparation of an aggression against Ukraine, but rather a kind of deterrence. My take is that in the Kremlin, they are concerned about a potential military action that Kyiv might undertake in Donbass to change the situation there to its advantage. And this is exactly what Moscow is trying to deny Ukraine from doing. I think that the idea is that Kyiv should stick to the Minsk agreements without trying to use military force in the east to resolve the Donbass problem. And the concentration of Russian forces on the border with Ukraine suggests that if Ukraine opts for a military solution of the Donbass problem, it will have to face very serious repercussions.
Andrey, another thing that the Kremlin is denying is being behind these cyber attacks against several Ukrainian government offices today. So I want to sort of switch gears and ask you about that. The message from Western leaders, whether it's President Biden or Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, from the very beginning was that we have to be very firm in our message to Russia. If there are any attacks against Ukraine, we should be very harsh in our response and robust in our response. If it is Russia, and I put the underlying on if, it would seem to be a very dangerous game to play, this semantics game.
Well, I would agree with that, but with cyber, as you know, there is always a problem of the attribution. If you talk to officials in the Kremlin, they would say that they intercept hundreds, if not thousands, cyber attacks against Russian governmental officers and against institutions in Russia. And these attacks come from the West. They also come from Ukraine. So I think the only way to handle the situation is to have a serious dialogue on how to prevent cyber attacks, or at least to limit them, because Russia has own list of grievances about cyber attacks against its territory.
I want your expert opinion on this. What's the next move, and how do we get out of this crisis?
Well, I think there are two options that Moscow can choose from. The first option would be to say that if you in the West cannot meet our requests or even demands, if you're not ready to discuss the most important issues about the non-enlargement of NATO, there is nothing else we can discuss with you, and we will try to deter you. We will try to continue doing what we are doing right now, and we will have an arms race and potential escalation. The other option, which in my view would be more logical and more productive, would be to look at what proposals coming from Moscow have got more or less positive response from the West, and there are a couple of them. So let us start with small incremental step, and probably later on we can get down to more sensitive, to more politically loaded issues like the NATO enlargement.
Andrey Kortunov, I really enjoyed this talk. Thank you very much for your analysis.